Maya Rodriguez walked through the heavy glass doors of Monroe County Courthouse at exactly 8:30 in the morning. Her hands were shaking a little as she carried an old brown folder stuffed with papers. The folder was so full that some papers were sticking out from the sides. She had stayed up until 3 in the morning making sure everything was ready for today. The 17-year-old girl looked around the big lobby with its high ceiling and marble floors. People in suits were walking, fast in different directions. Some were talking on their phones. Others were carrying briefcases that looked much fancier than Maya's simple folder. She felt very small in this place full of lawyers and important-looking people. Maya was wearing her best clothes today. She had on a navy blue dress that her mother Carmen had bought for her last year for church. Her black shoes were polished, so well that they almost looked new. She had braided her long dark hair neatly and pulled it back. Maya wanted to look as professional as possible, even though she was just a high school student. She found the elevator and pressed the button for the 3rd floor. As the elevator went up, Maya could feel her heart beating fast. She took deep breaths like her drama teacher had taught her before going on stage. Maya knew today would be one of the most important days of her life. When the elevator doors opened, Maya saw a long hallway with many doors. She looked at the paper in her hand that had the room number written on it, room 312. She walked down the hall reading the numbers on each door until she found the right one. Maya pushed open the heavy wooden door and stepped into the courtroom. It was bigger than she had expected. There were rows of wooden benches like in a church. At the front was a high desk where the judge would sit. Below that were 2 tables facing the judge. Maya knew one table was for the prosecutor and one was for the defendant. Today she would sit at the defendant table all by herself. A few people were already in the courtroom. Maya's mother Carmen was sitting in the front row of benches. She gave Maya a small wave and a worried smile. Next to Carmen sat Maya's 13-year-old brother Luis. He gave her a thumbs-up sign. Maya felt a little better seeing her family there to support her. At one of the tables sat a woman in an expensive-looking gray suit. Maya knew this was Amy Collins, the prosecutor. Amy was looking through a thick stack of papers and making notes with a fancy pen. She looked up when Maya walked in and gave her a look that seemed to say she thought this would be an easy case to win. Maya walked to the other table and sat down. She opened her folder and spread out her papers. They were not typed on a computer, like the prosecutor's papers. Most of Maya's papers were handwritten in her neat printing. Some were copies she had made at the library. A few were printouts she had made on the old computer at home. At exactly 9 o'clock, a man in a uniform came into the courtroom. This was Rick Murphy, the bailiff. He had worked at the courthouse for many years and had seen thousands of cases. Rick looked around the room and his eyes stopped on Maya sitting alone at the defendant table. He looked confused for a moment. Then another person came in. This was Linda Brooks, the court clerk. She was carrying a big book and some folders. Linda sat at a desk near the judge's bench and started getting ready for the court session to begin. Few more people came into the courtroom and sat on the benches. Some looked like they might be other lawyers waiting for their cases. Others might have been family members or friends of people with cases today. At 9:15, Bailiff Murphy stood up and said in a loud voice, "All rise." The Honorable Judge William Carter presiding. Everyone in the courtroom stood up as judge. Carter walked in through a door behind his bench. Judge Carter was a tall man who looked to be about 60 years old. His hair was gray, and he wore thick glasses. He had been a judge for more than 20 years and thought he had seen everything. He sat down in his big leather chair and looked out at the courtroom. Court Clerk Linda Brooks called out, "The case of the state versus Maya Rodriguez." Maya stood up, her legs feeling a little wobbly. Judge Carter looked down at her and then looked around the courtroom. His eyes went to the prosecutor's table where Amy Collins was sitting, then back to Maya's table where she stood alone. Judge Carter frowned and looked at his papers. He looked back up at Maya with a puzzled expression on his face. "Miss Rodriguez," he said in a voice that filled the whole courtroom, "where is your attorney?" "I don't see anyone at the defense table with you." Maya cleared her throat. Her voice came out smaller than she wanted it to, but she spoke clearly. "Your Honor, I will..." be representing myself in this case today. The judge's eyebrows went up high on his forehead. He looked at Maya for a long moment without saying anything. Then he looked at the prosecutor, Amy Collins, who had a small smile on her face. Judge Carter looked back at Maya and let out a little laugh that seemed mean. "Young lady," Judge Carter said, shaking his head, "this is a real courtroom, not your high school mock trial club. This is serious business. Are you absolutely sure you want to try to handle this case by yourself? You do understand that you are facing criminal charges here?" Maya felt her cheeks get hot, but she kept her voice steady. "Yes, Your Honor. I understand the charges against me, and I am prepared to defend myself." Judge Carter leaned back in his chair and looked at Maya like she was some kind of strange animal at the zoo. "Miss Rodriguez, I have been on this bench for over 20 years. I have seen thousands of cases. Let me tell you something. The law is complicated. It takes people many years of study to become lawyers. You are just a child playing dress up." Some people in the courtroom made quiet sounds like they felt bad for Maya. Her mother, Carmen, looked upset and Luis looked angry. But Maya just stood there and waited. "I strongly advise you to ask for a public defender," Judge Carter continued. "The court can appoint a real lawyer to help you. This is not a game, young lady. Your future could be affected by what happens here today." Maya took a deep breath. "Thank you for your concern, Your Honor. But I choose to represent myself. I am ready to proceed." Judge Carter shook his head again and made a sound like he was annoyed. "Very well. But don't say I didn't warn you when this goes badly for you. Mrs. Collins, please present your case against this defendant." As prosecutor Amy Collins stood up with a confident smile, Maya sat back down at her table. She looked at her simple handwritten notes while the prosecutor organized her fancy typed documents. Maya knew that everyone in the courtroom thought she was making a big mistake. Even her own mother looked worried. But Maya had a secret. She had spent weeks preparing for this day. She had studied law books at the library. She had researched similar cases on the internet. Most importantly, she had investigated the crime she was accused of committing. Maya knew things that no one else in this courtroom knew yet. She was ready to surprise them all. Prosecutor Amy Collins stood up from her table with a big smile on her face. She looked like a cat that was about to catch a mouse. Amy had been a prosecutor for 15 years and had won most of her cases. She thought this case would be the easiest one she had handled all year. After all, her opponent was just a 17-year-old girl with no legal training. Amy walked to the center of the courtroom and faced the judge. She was wearing an expensive gray suit and shiny black shoes that clicked on the floor when she walked. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a perfect bun and she carried herself like someone who was used to winning. "Your Honor," Amy began in a clear, confident voice, "the state will prove beyond any doubt that the defendant Maya Rodriguez committed an act of vandalism at Lincoln High School on the evening of March 15th. The evidence against Miss Rodriguez is clear and simple." Judge Carter nodded and looked at Maya sitting alone at her table. Maya was taking notes in her notebook with a regular pencil, while the prosecutor used an expensive pen to write on legal pads. Amy walked over to a table that had several items covered with white cloths. She pulled the cloth off the first item, which was a large photograph. The photo showed a brick wall with spray-painted words that said, "Education cuts, future stolen," in bright red letters. "This photograph shows the vandalism that was done to the south wall of Lincoln High School," Amy said, holding up the photo so everyone in the courtroom could see it. The message was spray-painted sometime between 6 and 8 o'clock in the evening on March 15th. Amy put down the first photo and picked up another one. This photo showed the same wall but from farther away. "As you can see, Your Honor, this damage was done to school property. The cost to clean and repaint this wall will be over $500. Judge Carter looked at the photos and then looked at Maya. "Miss Rodriguez, this seems like a serious amount of damage. I hope you understand how much trouble you could be in." Maya looked up from her notebook. "I understand the charges, Your Honor." Judge Carter made a sound like he was not impressed. "Continue, Mrs. Collins." Amy smiled and walked back to the evidence table. She uncovered another item, which was a laptop computer. "Your Honor, the state will now show security camera footage from Lincoln High School from the evening in question." Amy opened the laptop and pressed some buttons. A video started playing on a small screen that everyone could see. The video was in black and white and showed the outside of the school building. The timestamp in the corner showed 7:23 p.m. "Watch carefully," Amy said, pointing at the screen. In the video, a figure could be seen walking near the wall where the graffiti was found. The person in the video was about the same height as Maya and was wearing dark clothes. "As you can see," Amy continued, "someone matching the defendant's size and build was near the scene of the crime at the time the vandalism occurred." Judge Carter leaned forward to look at the video more closely. "The image is not very clear, Mrs. Collins. Can you make out who this person is?" "No, Your Honor, the video quality is not perfect, but combined with our other evidence, it clearly points to the defendant." Amy turned off the laptop and picked up a piece of paper. "Your Honor, the state has also learned that Maya Rodriguez was at Lincoln High School that evening for a student council meeting. She had access to the building and was on the school grounds at the exact time this crime was committed." Maya's mother, Carmen, shifted in her seat and looked worried. Her son, Louis, was frowning and looked like he wanted to say something, but he stayed quiet. Amy walked closer to Judge Carter's bench. "Furthermore, Your Honor, the message that was spray-painted, 'Education cuts, inking future stolen,' matches exactly with complaints that Maya Rodriguez has made at recent school board meetings. She has been very vocal about her opposition to budget cuts at the school." Judge Carter looked down at Maya with raised eyebrows. "Is this true, Miss Rodriguez? Have you been complaining about school budget cuts?" Maya started to stand up to answer, but Judge Carter held up his hand. "Sit down. I'm not asking you to defend yourself yet. Mrs. Collins, do you have more evidence?" "Yes, Your Honor." Amy picked up a small can from the evidence table. "This is a can of red spray paint that was found in a trash bin outside the school the next morning. The same red color as the vandalism." Amy set down the spray paint can and looked at Maya with a satisfied expression. "Your Honor, when you put all this evidence together, it is clear what happened. Maya Rodriguez was angry about budget cuts at her school. She was at the school that evening. She had the opportunity and the motive to commit this crime. The security camera shows someone her size near the scene. The spray paint can was found nearby." Judge Carter nodded slowly. "It does seem like a strong case, Mrs. Collins." Amy smiled widely. "The state believes this is a very simple case, Your Honor. All the evidence points to one conclusion. Maya Rodriguez is guilty of vandalism." Judge Carter looked at Maya again. She was still writing notes and did not look as worried as he thought she should. "Miss Rodriguez, you have heard the evidence against you. It looks pretty bad for you. Are you sure you don't want to reconsider getting a real lawyer?" Maya looked up from her notebook. "No, thank you, Your Honor. I am ready to present my defense." "Judge," Carter let out a long sigh and shook his head. "Young lady, I have been doing this job for a very long time. I can see when someone is in over their head. This prosecutor just presented evidence that would be hard for even an experienced lawyer to fight against." Several people in the courtroom nodded their heads in agreement. Even Maya's mother looked like she was starting to think her daughter should get a lawyer. "Let me make this easy for you," Judge Carter said, leaning back in his chair. "Mrs. Collins, would the state be willing to offer a plea agreement? Maybe some community service and a small fine? We could wrap this up quickly and save everyone time." Amy Collins nodded. "The state would be open to discussing a reasonable plea agreement, Your Honor." Judge Carter looked at Maya with what he probably thought was a kind expression. "There you go, Miss Rodriguez. You could plead guilty to a reduced charge, do some community service, pay a small fine, and this would all be over. You could go back to your normal teenage life and forget this ever happened." Maya closed her notebook and stood up. "Your Honor, I respectfully decline any plea agreement. I did not commit this crime, and I intend to prove my innocence." Judge Carter's kind expression disappeared. He looked annoyed now. "Miss Rodriguez, you are being very foolish. The evidence against you is strong. Any reasonable person would take this deal." "I understand your concern, Your Honor, but I am not guilty of this crime." Judge Carter looked at the clock on the wall. "Very well. But let's make this quick. I have real cases to handle today, and I don't want to waste too much time on this situation. Bailiff Rick Murphy, who had been watching everything from his spot near the judge's bench, shook his head slightly. In all his years working in the courthouse, he had seen many people make bad decisions. But he had never seen a teenager refuse such a good plea deal when the evidence looked so bad. Court reporter Helen Price, who was typing everything that was said, looked up from her machine for a moment to glance at Maya. Helen had typed thousands of court cases over the years, and she could usually tell how a case would end just by looking at the evidence. This looked like it would be over quickly. Maya sat back down at her table and opened her folder. She pulled out several papers and arranged them neatly in front of her. Everyone in the courtroom was watching her, and most of them looked like they felt sorry for her. But Maya did not look worried or scared. Instead, she looked calm and ready. She had let the prosecutor present all her evidence without objecting or interrupting once. Maya had listened carefully to everything Amy Collins had said, and she had taken detailed notes. Now it was Maya's turn, and she was ready to show everyone in that courtroom that things were not always what they seemed to be. Maya Rodriguez was about to prove that even a 17-year-old girl could surprise a room full of adults who thought they knew everything. Maya Rodriguez stood up slowly from her table. She picked up her first piece of paper and walked to the center of the courtroom. Everyone was watching her, and most of them looked like they felt sorry for her. Judge Carter was tapping his fingers on his desk, looking impatient. "Your Honor," Maya began, her voice clear and steady, "I would like to start by addressing the evidence that the prosecutor has presented." Judge Carter waved his hand like he was shooing away a fly. "Make it quick." "Miss Rodriguez, we all heard the evidence. It seems pretty clear-cut to me." Maya nodded politely. "I understand, Your Honor, but I believe there are some important facts that have not been considered yet." She held up the first paper from her folder. It was a timeline written in her neat handwriting with times listed down the left side and activities listed next to each time. "Your Honor, the prosecutor said that I was at Lincoln High School on the evening of March 15th for a student council meeting. This is true. However, I would like to show exactly where I was and when I was there." Maya walked closer to Judge Carter's bench so he could see her paper better. The student council meeting started at 6 o'clock in the library conference room. I arrived at 5:45 and did not leave the library area until 8:30. Judge Carter looked at the timeline but did not seem very interested. "Miss Rodriguez, just because you say you were in the library doesn't prove anything. You could have left the meeting and gone outside to spray paint the wall." "That's exactly what I thought you might say, Your Honor," Maya replied. She reached into her folder and pulled out several more papers. "That's why I brought proof." The first paper she showed was a sign-in sheet. At the top it said, "Lincoln High School Student Council Meeting, March 15th, and below that were signatures and times. Maya's signature was there at 5:45 p.m. "This is the sign-in sheet from our meeting," Maya explained. "But more importantly, we also have a sign-out sheet." She showed a second paper where her signature appeared at 8:30 p.m. Prosecutor Amy Collins looked up from her notes with a slight frown. She had not expected Maya to have documentation like this. "Your Honor," Maya continued, "I also have statements from other people who were at the meeting." She pulled out 5 handwritten letters. "These are signed statements from my fellow student, council members who were with me the entire evening." Maya handed the letters to Court Clerk Linda Brooks, who passed them up to Judge Carter. As the judge read through them, his expression started to change from bored to interested. "These students all say that you never left the library area during the meeting?" Judge Carter asked. "That's correct, Your Honor, but I have even more proof." Maya reached back into her folder and pulled out a photograph. "This photo was taken during our meeting at 7:35 p.m. The photo showed Maya and 6 other students sitting around a table in the library. Behind them was a clock on the wall that clearly showed 7:35. Maya was in the middle of the photo, obviously present at the meeting. "Who took this photograph?" Judge Carter asked. "Katie Williams, our secretary, took it for the yearbook committee. She will testify to that if needed." Amy Collins was starting to look uncomfortable. She whispered something to her assistant and started flipping through her files. Maya wasn't finished yet. She pulled out her cell phone and showed it to the judge. "Your Honor, may I approach the bench to show you something on my phone?" Judge Carter nodded and Maya walked up to his desk. She showed him her phone screen, which displayed a text message thread. These are text messages between me and my friend Sarah during the meeting. You can see the timestamps show that I was texting from inside the library at 7:28 p.m., 7:31 p.m., and 7:42 p.m. Judge Carter looked at the phone more carefully. The timestamps were clearly visible, and they showed Maya was actively using her phone during the exact time when the vandalism was supposed to have happened. Furthermore, Maya continued, walking back to the center of the courtroom, I have something else that I think is very important. She pulled out a ruler and a measuring tape from her folder. Your Honor, may I approach the evidence table to examine the photograph of the vandalism? Judge Carter looked curious now. Go ahead. Maya walked over to the evidence table and picked up the large photograph that showed the spray-painted message on the wall. She placed the ruler next to different parts of the wall in the photo. Your Honor, based on the size of the bricks in this photo and using this ruler for scale, I can show that the graffiti message was painted approximately 7 feet above the ground. She turned to face the courtroom. I am 5 feet and 2 inches tall. Even if I stood on my tiptoes, I could not reach 7 feet high. Judge Carter sat forward in his chair. Are you saying you're too short to have done this vandalism? That's exactly what I'm saying, Your Honor, but let me prove it. Maya walked over to the wall of the courtroom and stood against it. Your Honor, if you look at me standing here next to this wall, you can see that I cannot reach anywhere near 7 feet high. She raised her arm as high as she could reach. Even stretching as much as possible, her hand only reached about 6.5 feet high. The prosecutor suggested that I used a ladder or stood on something, Maya continued, but the security video she showed does not show anyone carrying a ladder or any kind of step stool. The person in the video appears to be walking with empty hands. Amy Collins stood up quickly. Your Honor, the defendant could have hidden a ladder nearby and retrieved it later. Maya nodded. That's a good point, Mrs. Collins. But I investigated that possibility too. She pulled out more photographs from her folder. These are pictures I took of the area around the school wall. As you can see, there are no places to hide. A ladder near that wall. The area is completely open with no trees, bushes, or buildings where someone could store equipment. Judge Carter was now paying complete attention to Maya. The bored expression was gone from his face, and he was listening carefully to every word she said. Your Honor, I have one more piece of evidence that I think is very important, Maya said. She pulled out a folder that was separate from her main collection of papers. I did some research and discovered that this is not the only case of graffiti at schools in our district recently. She opened the folder and pulled out several photographs. These are pictures of similar vandalism that happened at 3 other schools in the past 2 months. She showed the photos to Judge Carter. Each one showed spray-painted messages about education cuts, all in the same style of handwriting and all in the same red paint. Washington Elementary School on January 20th, Roosevelt Middle School on February 3rd, Kennedy High School on February 28th, and now Lincoln High School on March 15th. Maya pulled out a calendar and showed it to the judge. Your Honor, I can prove that I was not at any of these other schools when their vandalism occurred. I was either in class, at home with my family, or at other documented activities. Amy Collins was now looking through her files frantically. She clearly had not known about the other vandalism cases. This suggests, Maya continued, that there is someone else who has been doing these acts of vandalism at multiple schools. Someone who is taller than me and who has been active for months. Judge Carter looked at the photographs of all 4 vandalism sites. The handwriting in each case looked very similar, and the messages were all about the same topic. Mrs. Collins, Judge Carter said, turning to the prosecutor, were you aware of these other cases? Amy Collins looked embarrassed. No, Your Honor. This information was not provided to the prosecution. Maya walked back to her table and picked up one final piece of paper. Your Honor, I have one last thing to show you. This morning before court, I went back to the area around Lincoln High School to take more photographs. She held up a new photo that looked like it had been printed very recently. This picture shows the view from Peterson's hardware store, which is across the street from the school. Mr. Peterson has security cameras that point toward the street. Judge Carter looked at the photo. Did you speak with Mr. Peterson about his cameras? Yes, Your Honor. He told me that his cameras recorded the entire evening of March 15th, but no one from the police ever asked to see the footage. The courtroom was completely quiet now. Even Maya's mother Carmen and brother Luis were sitting forward in their seats, amazed at what Maya was presenting. Mr. Peterson said he would be happy to provide his security footage to the court if requested. Maya concluded Amy Collins looked like she wanted to disappear. She had thought this would be an easy case, but Maya had just presented evidence that the police investigation had been incomplete and that there might be footage that could prove Maya's innocence. Judge Carter removed his glasses and cleaned them slowly. This was something he did when he was thinking hard about a case. After a long moment, he looked at Maya with an expression that was completely different from how he had looked at her earlier. "Miss Rodriguez," he said quietly, "this is quite remarkable detective work." Maya Rodriguez took a deep breath and looked around the courtroom. Everyone was staring at her with amazement. Judge Carter was leaning forward in his chair, completely focused on what she was saying. Prosecutor Amy Collins looked worried and was shuffling through her papers nervously. Even bailiff Rick Murphy, who had seen thousands of cases, was watching Maya with interest. "Your Honor," Maya said, her voice growing stronger, "I want to address something that Mrs. Collins mentioned. In her opening statement, she talked about the message that was spray-painted on the school wall." Maya walked back to the evidence table and picked up the photograph of the graffiti. She held it up so everyone could see it clearly. The message says, "Education cuts, future stolen." Mrs. Collins suggested that because I have spoken against budget cuts at school board meetings, this proves I wrote this message. Judge Carter nodded. "That does seem like a logical connection, Miss Rodriguez. I understand why it might seem that way, Your Honor, but I want to explain why this actually proves my innocence, not my guilt." Maya reached into her folder and pulled out a thick stack of papers held together with a paper clip. "Your Honor, these are copies of petitions that I have been collecting for the past 4 months. I have been asking students, parents, and teachers to sign these petitions to protest the budget cuts." She handed the petitions to Court Clerk Linda Brooks, who passed them up to Judge Carter. The judge flipped through the pages, and his eyebrows raised when he saw how many signatures there were. "How many signatures do you have here?" Judge Carter asked. "Over 800, Your Honor. I have been working every day after school and on weekends to collect these signatures through proper legal means." Maya pulled out another folder. "I also have copies of all the emails I have sent to school board, members, the superintendent, and even our state representatives about the budget cuts." She showed Judge Carter a printed stack of emails. "These emails go back to December of last year. As you can see, I have been fighting these budget cuts through the proper legal channels for months." Amy Collins stood up. "Your Honor, this doesn't prove that the defendant didn't commit vandalism. It actually shows how passionate she is about this issue." Maya turned to face the prosecutor. "Mrs. Collins, you're absolutely right that I am passionate about this issue, but that's exactly my point." Maya walked to the center of the courtroom and faced Judge Carter directly. "Your Honor, I have spent 4 months of my life working within the system to fight these budget cuts. I have attended every school board meeting since December. I have organized 3 peaceful protests that were approved by the school administration. I have started a letter-writing campaign that has reached the governor's office." She pulled out more papers from her folder. "Here are the meeting minutes from 6 school board meetings where I spoke during the public comment period. Here are the permits for our peaceful protests. Here are copies of letters from the governor's office acknowledging our concerns." Judge Carter looked through the documents. "This is quite a lot of work, Miss Rodriguez." "Yes, Your Honor, it is. And that's why the idea that I would suddenly decide to commit vandalism makes no sense. Why would I risk everything I have worked for by doing something illegal?" Maya's voice became more passionate as she continued. "Your Honor, I am the president of the Student Council. I have a 4.0 grade average. I have been accepted to State University with a full academic scholarship. The scholarship requires that I maintain good grades and have no criminal record." She pulled out a letter from her folder. "This is my acceptance letter from State University. As you can see, any criminal conviction would cause me to lose my scholarship." Judge Carter read the letter carefully. "So you're saying you have too much to lose to commit this crime?" "That's exactly right, Your Honor. I have been working my entire high school career to earn this scholarship. I have been working legally and peacefully to fight the budget cuts. Why would I throw all of that away to spray paint a message on a wall? Maya walked back to the evidence table and picked up the photograph of the graffiti again. Furthermore, Your Honor, if I had wanted to send a message about education cuts, I would not have done it this way. She pulled out a newspaper clipping from her folder. This is an article from our local newspaper about our protest last month. Over 200 people attended, and we got our message out to the entire community through legal means. Maya showed the newspaper article to Judge Carter. There was a large photo of Maya speaking to a crowd of students and parents with a headline that read, "Students Rally Against Education Budget Cuts." As you can see, Your Honor, I already have effective ways to get attention for this issue. I don't need to break the law to make my voice heard. Amy Collins stood up again. Your Honor, people sometimes make bad decisions when they're frustrated, even if they usually make good choices. Maya nodded. That's true, Mrs. Collins, but I want to show you something else that proves I didn't do this. Maya reached into her folder and pulled out what looked like a school yearbook. Your Honor, this is last year's Lincoln High School yearbook. I want to show you the page about our art program. She opened the yearbook to a marked page and showed it to Judge Carter. The page was full of pictures of students working on art projects, including several photos of students doing murals and graffiti-style artwork. Our school used to have an excellent art program, Maya explained. Students learned how to do legal, graffiti and mural painting as part of their art classes, but the art program was one of the first things cut from the budget. Maya pointed to one of the photos in the yearbook. This is Jake Morrison. He was one of the best graffiti artists in our school's art program. He's a senior this year and he's very upset about the art program being canceled. Judge Carter looked at the photo. Are you suggesting that this Jake Morrison might be responsible for the vandalism? I'm not accusing anyone specific, Your Honor, but I am pointing out that there are other students who have both the artistic skill and the motivation to create this type of message. Maya pulled out another piece of paper. I made a list of all the students who were in the advanced art program before it was canceled. There are 15 students who have the skills to create professional-looking graffiti like what was found on the school wall. She handed the list to Judge Carter. All of these students are upset about the budget cuts, and all of them have the artistic ability to create the message that was found. Maya walked back to her table and picked up her final piece of evidence. It was a manila envelope that looked like it had never been opened. Your Honor, I have one more thing to show you. Yesterday afternoon, I went to Peterson's hardware store and spoke with Mr. Peterson about his security cameras. She opened the envelope and pulled out what looked like a DVD in a clear plastic case. Mr. Peterson was kind enough to make me a copy of his security footage from the evening of March 15th. The courtroom became very quiet. Amy Collins looked surprised and concerned. Judge Carter sat up straighter in his chair. Your Honor, Mr. Peterson's cameras point directly at the area where the vandalism occurred. His footage shows the entire evening from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. Maya held up the DVD. I have not watched this footage yet, Your Honor. I wanted to present it in court so that everyone could see it at the same time. Judge Carter looked at the DVD with great interest. Mrs. Collins, did the police investigation include footage from Peterson's hardware store? Amy Collins looked embarrassed. No, Your Honor. The police report does not mention any footage from that location. Your Honor, Maya continued, I believe this footage will show who really committed this vandalism. It will also prove that I was not involved in any way. Maya walked over to Amy Collins' table. Mrs. Collins, you have a laptop computer. Would you be willing to play this DVD so everyone can see what it shows? Amy looked like she did not want to do this, but she nodded. Yes, I can play the DVD. Judge Carter leaned forward. Let's see this footage, Mrs. Collins. As Amy Collins set up her laptop to play the DVD, Maya walked back to her table. Her mother, Carmen, was smiling proudly, and her brother, Luis, gave her a thumbs up. Even some of the strangers in the courtroom were nodding with approval. Maya knew that this DVD would either prove her innocence completely or make her situation much worse, but she was confident in what the footage would show. She had spent weeks investigating this case, and she believed she knew who the real vandal was. The laptop screen lit up, and everyone in the courtroom leaned forward to see what the security footage would reveal. Maya took a deep breath and waited for the truth to finally come out. Amy Collins put the DVD into her laptop with shaking hands. The courtroom was completely silent except for the quiet humming of the computer. Everyone was staring at the laptop screen, waiting to see what the security footage would show. Maya sat at her table with her hands folded, looking calm but with her heart beating very fast. The video started playing on the laptop screen. It showed a black and white view of the street in front of Lincoln High School. The timestamp in the corner showed 6 p.m. on March 15th. Amy turned the laptop so that Judge Carter and everyone else in the courtroom could see the screen clearly. For the first hour, nothing interesting happened in the video. A few cars drove by on the street. Some people walked past on the sidewalk. The school building looked quiet and empty from the outside. At 7:15 p.m., a figure appeared on the video walking toward the school. Judge Carter leaned forward to look more closely. The person was wearing dark clothes and a baseball cap pulled down low. They were carrying what looked like a backpack. "There," Amy said, pointing at the screen. "That must be the vandal." Maya watched the screen carefully but said nothing. The figure in the video walked around to the side of the school building where the graffiti was found. For several minutes, the person was out of view of the camera. At 7:32 p.m., the same figure appeared again walking away from the school. But now something was different. The person was no longer carrying the backpack, and they seemed to be walking faster, like they were in a hurry to leave. Judge Carter looked at the video with great interest. "Can we see this person's face at all?" Amy rewound the video and played it again in slow motion. When the figure first walked toward the school, they kept their head down and the baseball cap covered most of their face. But when they walked away from the school, they looked up for just a moment. "Stop the video there," Judge Carter said. Amy paused the video at the moment when the person's face was most visible. The image was not perfectly clear, but it was clear enough to see that this was not Maya Rodriguez. The person in the video was clearly taller than Maya. Even with the baseball cap on, you could see that this person had short hair, not long hair, like Maya's. And most importantly, this was obviously a male, not a female. The courtroom was completely silent for several seconds. Judge Carter stared at the screen, then looked at Maya, then back at the screen. Prosecutor Amy Collins looked like she had been slapped in the face. "This is clearly not the defendant," Judge Carter said slowly. Maya stood up from her table. "Your Honor, may I say something about what we just saw?" Judge Carter nodded. "Please do, Miss Rodriguez." Maya walked to the center of the courtroom. "Your Honor, I believe I know who that person is." She pulled out the yearbook she had shown earlier and opened it to the page about the art program. She pointed to the photo of Jake Morrison that she had mentioned before. "Your Honor, I believe the person in the video is Jake Morrison. He's a senior at Lincoln High School, and he was one of the best students in our art program before it was canceled." Maya pulled out another piece of paper from her folder. "I did some research about Jake. He has been very angry about the budget cuts, especially the cancellation of the art program. He was planning to study art in college, but now he's worried about his future." Judge Carter looked at the yearbook photo and then back at the video screen. The height and build do seem similar. "Furthermore, Your Honor," Maya continued, "Jake has the artistic skills to create professional-looking graffiti. He also knows the school building very well, and would know the best times and places to avoid being seen by the main security cameras." Amy Collins finally found her voice. "Your Honor, this is all speculation. We cannot identify the person in the video with certainty." Maya nodded. "You're right, Mrs. Collins. We cannot be completely certain from this video alone. But what we can be certain of is that the person in this video is not me." She walked over to stand next to the laptop screen. "As you can clearly see, this person is much taller than I am. They have different hair, different clothing, and different body shape. This video proves that I was not the person who committed this vandalism." Judge Carter removed his glasses and cleaned them again. This time he cleaned them very slowly, thinking about everything he had seen and heard. When he put his glasses back on, he looked at Maya with an expression of complete amazement. "Miss Rodriguez," Judge Carter said quietly, In 32 years of practicing law and 21 years of being a judge, I have never seen anything like what you have presented in this courtroom today. The judge stood up from his chair, which made everyone else in the courtroom sit up straighter. You have not only proven your innocence beyond any reasonable doubt, you have essentially solved a case that the police failed to investigate properly. Amy Collins looked down at her table, clearly embarrassed by how badly her case had fallen apart. Judge Carter continued. You presented a detailed timeline with multiple forms of proof showing exactly where you were during the time of the crime. You showed physical evidence proving that you could not have reached the location where the graffiti was painted. You discovered connections to similar crimes at other schools that the police had missed. And most importantly, you found security footage that the police never bothered to look for. Maya stood quietly, listening to every word. Mrs. Collins, Judge Carter said, turning to the prosecutor, I trust that the state will be dropping all charges against Miss Rodriguez immediately. Amy Collins stood up slowly. Yes, Your Honor. The state moves to dismiss all charges against the defendant. But Judge Carter was not finished. He looked directly at Maya with what could only be described as deep respect. Miss Rodriguez, I owe you a sincere apology. When you first walked into my courtroom this morning, I made assumptions about you based on your age. I thought you were just a foolish teenager who was in over her head. I was wrong, and I am sorry. Maya's mother, Carmen, started crying tears of joy. Her brother, Luis, was grinning so widely that his face hurt. Several people in the courtroom started clapping quietly. You have shown a level of legal reasoning, investigative skill, and professional preparation that would be impressive in any attorney. Judge Carter continued. You understood the importance of evidence. You knew how to build a logical argument. Most importantly, you never gave up, even when everyone around you thought you should. The judge paused and looked around the courtroom. I have learned something important today. I learned that I should never underestimate someone based on their age or their choice to represent themselves. Justice can come from the most unexpected places. Maya felt tears starting to form in her eyes, but she kept her voice steady. Thank you, Your Honor. I just wanted to prove the truth. And you did exactly that, Judge Carter replied. Mrs. Collins, I trust that the police will be reopening this investigation and will be looking into the other similar cases that Miss Rodriguez discovered. Amy Collins nodded. Yes, Your Honor. We will contact the police department immediately. Judge Carter looked at Maya one more time. Miss Rodriguez, you mentioned earlier that you have been accepted to State University with a full scholarship. To study law? Yes, Your Honor. Well, if today is any indication of your abilities, you are going to make an excellent lawyer someday. This court is officially adjourned. As Judge Carter left the courtroom, everyone started talking at once. Maya's mother and brother rushed to hug her. Several lawyers who had been watching from the gallery came over to congratulate her. Even bailiff Rick Murphy shook her hand and said he had never seen anything like it. But the most satisfying moment came when Amy Collins walked over to Maya's table. The prosecutor looked embarrassed but also impressed. Miss Rodriguez, Amy said quietly, I have to admit that you taught me something today. I'm sorry I underestimated you. You did excellent work. Maya shook Amy's hand. Thank you, Mrs. Collins. I hope the real vandal is caught soon. As Maya packed up her papers and put them back in her old brown folder, she thought about how much her life had changed in just one morning. She had walked into this courtroom as a teenager who was accused of a crime she didn't commit. She was walking out as someone who had proven that age and experience are not the only things that matter in a courtroom. Most importantly, Maya had learned that standing up for the truth, even when everyone doubts you, is always worth the effort. She had shown everyone in that courtroom that sometimes the most powerful voice can come from the most unexpected person. Maya Rodriguez walked out of the Monroe County Courthouse with her head held high, ready to continue her fight for education, funding through legal means, and ready to begin her journey toward becoming the lawyer she now knew she was meant to be.